Hey everyone, and welcome to our Q&A presented by Just Love. My name is Paula Jane and I'm talking to Judy Carroll. Judy is an internationally known author. Her books include The Zeta Message, Human by Day, Zeta by Night, Extraterrestrial Presence on Earth, Lessons in History, and her two most recent books, both Kindle editions and both also available in German, An Interview with an Alien, Comments by an Undercover ET, and Cosmic Spirituality, Blending Religion and Science in Oneness from an Off-Planet Perspective. Hi, Judy.
Hi, Paula. Hi, everyone.
Well, in our last episode, Judy, you spoke of how the Reptarian controllers are still incarnating down here and using faked ET abductions, known as MyLabs, to fool people and make them think that they're being abducted by evil aliens. They've even manufactured what researcher Dr. Stephen Greer refers to as PLFs, or programmed life forms, that closely resemble the genuine Greys, to cause people to hate and fear them. Judy, you also said that this deception is encouraged by disinformation plants who often attend UFO groups and conferences, pretending to be genuine contactees. Can you talk about this a little bit more, because this is important for people to be aware of?
Yes, Paula, I sure can, having come up against it on several occasions. Quite a few years ago, I joined our local UFO Research Association and used to get their magazine. In one edition, there was a story written by someone who was an associate of George Adamski, the well-known contactee from back in the 1950s, 1960s. George Adamski did many talks all over the world about his ongoing contacts with supposed ETs, and he filled halls with his audiences of hundreds of people. He was strongly promoted by our UFO research group here. In this article, his associate commented on Adamski's ETs as being perfectly nice-looking normal humans, not the bug-eyed monsters that people have been experiencing in later encounters. Of course, it was the Greys he was referring to, and this made me angry. I replied with my own article, pointing out that I'd never come across his human-looking ETs, but had had many positive encounters with these so-called bug-eyed monsters since early childhood, and looked upon them as family. Since doing more research on this over the years, the conclusion I've come to is that George Adamski's normal human-looking ETs looked that way because they were from right here on Earth, or rather from the so-called inner Earth.
Judy, can you explain briefly the inner Earth for those who don't know?
Yes, Paula, there's quite a bit of confusion over this. The actual inner Earth is of a different dimension. It's not physical. At the same time, there are kilometres of deep tunnels and large areas deep underground that are physical. But as far as I understand, George Adamski's contacts were interdimensional rather than extraterrestrial. These interdimensionals do have ships that are often mistaken for genuine ET ships. In fact, their craft, which Adamski photographed, looked very similar to the UFOs that were being manufactured back then by the Nazis using technology given to them by this inner Earth Aryan master race. These ones were the inspiration behind Hitler and the whole Nazi movement. This is why Hitler sent troops out regularly to search for an entrance to the inner Earth.
Yes, so much hidden and manipulated information. Do you have any other examples to share on this?
Yes, I do. Another such series of encounters occurred in South Africa, experienced by a woman by the name of Elizabeth Clara and described in her book Beyond the Light Barrier. She claims to have met and become pregnant to one of these very attractive human-type beings, a man who claimed to be from a planet called Metron in the Proxima Centauri system. I've read her story, and her ET contact came across to me as rather condescending and not particularly spiritual. Interestingly enough, a number of people who wrote reviews on this book when it was available on Amazon made similar comments. The inner Earth people do claim to come from other planets as a way of covering up who they are and where they really come from, that is, right here on Earth.
Do you have anything else to share?
Yes, the third example of serious disinformation involves a man by the name of William Milton Cooper, whose story is told in Michael Hasseman and Philip Mantle's book entitled Beyond Roswell. I first heard of this disinformation when another Earth human grey friend contacted me some years ago in a very upset state. She'd been abused and subjected to some nasty cosmic racism by somebody who claims Pleiadian connections. This person aimed an accusation at her about the 24,000 Greys, who were supposed to have done something terrible down here. My friend had never heard of this and contacted me to see if I knew what it was about, which I didn't. I googled it, as you do, and the story is told in the Beyond Roswell book. It supposedly occurred in the 1950s or thereabouts, when the Greys are said to have approached the United States government with the story that their race was dying out and that they needed genetic input from Earth humans in order to survive. It was then claimed that a treaty was signed with the government giving the Greys permission to abduct Earth humans and harvest whatever was required in exchange for advanced technology. They were supposed to work only with a restricted number of Earth humans, but the story goes that they broke the treaty and began a campaign of mass abductions, harvesting blood, glandular secretions, etc., from both humans and animals, and that their plan is to eventually invade and take over the Earth.
Sounds a little bit far-fetched. So, were you able to find information on the source of these negative claims about the Greys?
Yes, I sure did. This takes us back to William Milton Cooper. Cooper appeared on the UFO scene in the 1970s, making a very questionable claim that, having been in the Navy in 1971 as a quartermaster, and having read all of this earlier material on the Greys, he'd been singled out to brief the commander of the Pacific Fleet. In order to be able to do this, he claimed to have received all the necessary documents from Washington pertaining to ET contact. This was a ludicrous claim, but instead of being asked to produce evidence of this, he managed to carry on, speaking in front of overflowing auditoriums, obviously making lots of money out of it, and elaborating and enhancing his story with each lecture he gave. As the lectures progressed, the ETs suddenly became cosmic vampires who nourished themselves on the body fluids of humans and were preparing to take over the Earth. William Milton Cooper also claimed that the United States government had aligned itself with them and had sold land and people to them in exchange for their technology. So this seems to be where the story of the 24,000 Greys originated, as a money-making campaign by William Milton Cooper. But from what I understand, he was just part of a much bigger disinformation campaign about the Greys that was being put in place right from the 1950s. The truth is, this story of gaining possession of advanced technology in exchange for the harvesting of blood and other glandular secretions was actually done by the Nazis as part of their genetic experiments to create an Aryan master race. I believe that it's still being done by the tall, blonde, blue-eyed inner Earth group that the Zetas refer to as the Blondes, who, along with the Repterrans, waged war upon, captured and mutated the Ant people, who were a very early incarnation of the Zetas right here on Earth. These things have been done, but not by the Greys. It's an ongoing agenda from right here on Earth being carried out by the controllers, but using racism as a weapon and laying the blame on the very different-looking Greys who don't conform to the Earth-human concept of beauty.
Wow. So what do you think this agenda is really all about?
Well, as is also mentioned in the Beyond Roswell book, this agenda began not long after the Roswell crash, so probably in the late 1940s to early 1950s. This crash of a genuine ET craft alerted the Planetary Controllers to the fact that higher universal authorities were aware of what was going on down here and perhaps planning to intervene. The agenda right from the start was set up specifically to portray the ETs as being evil aliens planning to invade Earth. This way, if the ETs did turn up, they'd immediately be hated and feared. The controllers don't want to lose their control over humanity. The last thing they want is for the ETs to turn up down here to help people get free of all the brainwashing and control that's gone on over millennia. Another of the many lies that have been spread is that human body parts were found in the ship at Roswell, which is total rubbish. The claim that the ETs were planning to invade Earth was also brought up in a book entitled The Day After Roswell, written by Colonel Philip Corso and William J. Burns. Philip Corso has always been very positive about the ETs and has had some contact with them during his time of back engineering material from the Roswell crash. And once in an interview he was asked about this negative information in his book. He explained that he never put that in the book and that it must have been inserted by the co-author. Unfortunately, this disinformation was then taken up and also quoted in the book by Len Kasten entitled Secret Journey to Planet Serpo. As I spoke about in our last episode 64, the reason behind the Roswell crash was to try to even out the playing field here on Earth. The Nazis were not defeated at the end of the Second World War. They simply went underground and planned a major world takeover using the anti-gravity technology that they'd been given by the tall blonde inner Earth group. The Zetas had suffered at the hands of these Repterrans and Blondes in their earlier incarnation as the Ant people on Earth, and they could not just stand back and allow this to happen again. They could see this same ethnic cleansing and genetic manipulation agenda being carried out by the Nazis that happened with their own people. This cosmic racism has been force-fed to Earth humans by this same inner Earth group who pose as angels, Pleiadians, Venusians, space brothers, or whatever.
So it all leads back to the Reptarians and the Blondes from the inner Earth.
Yes, it does, and the whole agenda is to demonise the genuine ETs, especially the Zetas, who are coming here to try to help humanity to avoid the same fate that happened to them as the Ant people on Earth eons ago. A major part of this agenda is being set up for a carefully planned alien invasion, but it's not genuine ETs behind it, it's this inner Earth group who have aligned themselves with extremist political groups, just as they did with the Nazi regime. Technology that resembles off-planet ships is available down here, and they also use holographic imagery, drugs, and the manufactured programmed life forms, the PLFs, that Dr. Stephen Greer talks about in his book Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge, to fool people into believing that the Greys are the baddies.
Judy, can you give us an example of what you mean when you say that they used holographic imagery and the manufactured programmed life forms, the PLFs?
Yes, I can. This type of trickery, along with hypnotic suggestion, happened at a UFO experiencer gathering in Newport, Rhode Island in 2004, attended by the same man who we took up on the ship some years ago to have a negative implant removed from his head. I'll call him David, but that's not his real name. At this gathering, he experienced a whole faked scenario in which negative Greys suddenly appeared on the scene during a dinner party and were defeated by a group of so-called light workers. Soon after this event, David became affiliated with these light workers and began suffering health problems. He's now totally disappeared off the scene. This happened in a crowded room, but only he experienced it. After we'd removed the fake implant up on the ship, his contact experiences with the Greys had become more positive, but then he decided to undergo regressions with a certain hypnotist who we knew was working for the controllers. We tried to talk him out of contacting this guy, but he went ahead. Negative stuff then started happening again, and this hypnotist was present at this Rhode Island gathering. Like many people, David was experiencing contact with both the genuine Zetas and also having faked MyLab encounters. It was during one of the fake encounters that the implant was put into his head, which we removed. If I remember rightly, it happened when he was quite young, and he still had a scar on his head from it.
Oh, gosh. So basically the controller agenda is aimed at demonising the genuine Zetas to make people scared and distrustful of them. This then blocks the Zetas from being able to approach people and assist them to awaken to genuine ET contact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The very last thing the Planetary Controllers want is for the genuine ETs to come here, to awaken humanity to what has really been going on down here for millennia in the way of control and brainwashing through religion, politics and warmongering. This is why this whole agenda of demonising the Zetas has been put in place since not long after the Roswell crash. Attempts were made quite early in the piece by the ETs to communicate, but of course it's all been twisted to make them seem like evil invaders. They then started quietly approaching individuals to try to get their message across, but this was then hijacked by the MyLabs with fake negative abductions in which people are hurt and frightened. This is the reason why some of us are now coming here with a dual soul consciousness, so that we can speak out in a way that people can hear and see us, and we can relate to both sides in order to get a clearer message across.
Yeah, that's right. And this is the very reason why we feel such a need to record these podcasts, to get more accurate information about the genuine ETs out there, to try to overcome all the fear and disinformation. So, if you would like to read more about all of this, I'd just like to remind everybody that Judy's books are available from Amazon, or you can go directly through Judy's website, which is included in the link below. And if you did enjoy this video, please share it with your family and friends and subscribe to this channel. Until next time, sending you all so much, and thank you all so much for listening. Bye for now.